back. Come back here. All right, let's have a seat. Before we start, I want to give a shout out to the team who has been building this event for the last few months now. And I don't know if you know, but we decided to do this about 2 months ago. And if you put an event like this in 2 months, you're a rock star on my playbook. So Sarah and many, many others, thank you. All right, so we are here to work on interoperability, and it's an interesting topic because all of us don't really think about this on a daily basis. We think about building our own company, our own platform, our own layer ones, and we very often end up talking about interoperability because we have to, not because we want to. And so I'm gonna challenge the panel a little bit today, but before I do that, if you can introduce yourselves and then tell us how you define interoperability in your context so that we can have a different version of the definition, I guess. Magnus.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Magnus. I am one of the co-CEOs of the Interchain Labs entity. We basically are the Cosmos Foundation and Cosmos Labs entity. So if you've heard of Atom or the Cosmos Hub or IBC or Cosmos SDK or Tendermint, that's us. In our ecosystem, interop is sort of defined by this permissionless protocol called IBC, which is basically a way to trustlessly, or pretty much trustlessly, transfer assets between two separate L1 blockchains. Previously, it was basically only limited to Cosmos, but as of this month, will now be extended to any other blockchain that has a smart contract platform available. So Ethereum, Solana, we're super excited about. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm David, working for the Web3 Foundation. You probably, or not everyone knows it, but Web3 Foundation is the entity behind Polkadot. And yeah, in our ecosystem, we have something similar. It's called XCMP, Cross-Chain Message Protocol, for our ecosystem internally, but we are also working together with XLR and Layer 0 via Moonbeam and EVM-compatible chains in our ecosystem.
Hey, James Friel, lead chain integrations for InterOp Labs, and we're the initial developers of the XLR network. I think for us, very simply, interoperability is communication between disparate blockchains, composability of smart contracts and assets between different chains.
Nice and concise. Simon Baxis, I lead the global business at Layer 0, the market-leading omni-chain interoperability protocol. Hedera's near and dear to my heart personally. I used to work at Google for 7 years and represented Google on the governing council for Hedera, so know a lot of folks here very, very well, and it's exciting to see this all come together. And yeah, I think interoperability, as we define it, is really just complete feature parity and complete sort of composability across any ecosystem, any blockchain, any VM, right? So whether it's Rust, whether it's Move, or whether it's Solidity, you want everything to be completely standardized and have communication between that, be that for messaging, which is what we do, be that for value transfer, which you can use messaging to do, and really just create like composable ecosystems and hopefully kind of a one tide raises all ships type of approach in terms of all blockchains working together.
Thank you. And thank you all for working with many of us here in the room and with Hedera, of course. David, question for you. Make it real for us. How do you translate all we are talking about here about interoperability into something that's real, right? Why do we need interoperability?
So I think interoperability is basically what brings this space to the next level. If you have a blockchain and it's only used by one entity, then it's not super helpful. To make it real, to give an example, we have a big gaming company in our ecosystem on Polkadot that uses this chain to bring to leverage it for decentralized, for trustless setup and so on. But it becomes really useful when this chain, this team can interact with others. And ultimately, basically, you can use the tokens and icons that you purchased in one game in another game if you can trustlessly transfer your assets from one chain to another and so on. When you create this network effect, I think then it becomes super powerful and able to outperform basically Web 2. Yeah.
Simon, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think like interoperability can mean a lot of different things, right? And some buzzword that's been used for ages, be that like interoperability between blockchains is what we're talking about, interoperability between financial systems, applications. So there's many different ways to look at it, but I think like one of the most easy examples to understand is really just taking Circle USDC and CCTP, right? And you look at all these different ecosystems, you have USDC as a stablecoin deployed on 18 different chains natively, including Hedera. But then you have CCTP, which was created to solve the liquidity fragmentation and the wrapping of assets, et cetera, later on. That's, for example, on 11 different chains, right? So you have the ability to natively mint and burn USDC across those 11 chains, but then you have 7 other chains that don't have CCTP hooked up, for example, which means you either have a sort of siloed USDC, right? And so if you have USDC on a chain that doesn't have CCTP, you're basically just stuck there, right? Unless you're swapping, which then creates slippage, fees, et cetera, to try to get out of that ecosystem. Or for those that don't even have native USDC, you have wrapped USDC that exists, right? So you ultimately just have a lot of fragmentation, and like something like a stablecoin is such a necessity for any chain to have, and obviously every chain wants USDC, but like the lack of interoperability there creates a lot of user issues and a poor user experience, right? And so I think like that to me, and in general, I think when we think about cross-chain interoperability, the biggest use case today is value transfer, whether we like it or not. And so creating that native interop for assets to move across chains is like the base level case that we all ought to do, right? Like if you have all these different assets that live in different blockchains, but they're not actually interoperable, it's fairly useless, right? And so that's what we do, and that's where we pioneered the OFT standard, which is Omnichain Fungible Token Standard, to allow the native minting and burning of assets across ecosystems. And again, to me, that's just sort of like table stakes. That's the biggest use case in crypto, and it's still actually not solved that well.
Yeah.
And then let alone get into like actual messaging and applications living on different blockchains and communicating, but like even the sort of the asset transfer itself is a critical piece.
Yeah. James?
Yeah. I think everybody's pretty familiar with like the blockchain trilemma. And so part of the issue is that if developers can't use blockchains for singular purposes in an interconnected way to build more complex applications, we're just never going to get to the adoption, this billion users that we talk about. And that requires connectivity, interoperability, communication between these disparate chains. So without offending anyone, if you look at the applications over the last few years, there's really not been a ton of evolution. Pretty simple DeFi applications being spun up on different chains that might be more performant. But really, it's going to take a standardization of these token standards, of us working together with other interoperability protocols to really achieve the necessary level of interoperability, which will allow for next-gen applications. And I think that's just critical for the entire space, and interoperability plays a huge role in that.
Yeah, yeah. Magnus?
Yeah. I think one of the things that makes interoperability hard is that blockchains were not designed for interop, right? Like, interop was never an issue when all we had was Ethereum, right? You just smart contract transferred around within the protocol addresses on the same state machine. I think it really became much more of a big issue when we started to think about multi-chain. And what's very interesting to me is I view a lot of interop as basically trying to solve this problem that sort of organically came out of wanting to have multiple different state machines, right? Wanting to have Hedera with Cosmos Hub, with Ethereum, with Solana, et cetera. One of the things that I think I encourage protocol designers and people who are interested in interop to think about is, can you design the set of blockchains in a way that is actually natively interoperable, right? So it's built into the protocol. And I think that's one of the ways that IBC innovated quite a bit because it uses the validator set of the chain to actually prove the bridging transactions. And then it does that over a permissionless open protocol that anyone can relay those transactions. Could be literally anyone, could be you, right? And I think that's a very powerful model because one, it doesn't rely upon a third-party bridge. But I think what's been really nice to see in sort of addition to IBC as being sort of this built-in interop protocol is a lot of the other interop protocols, like the excellent ones here, have solved around multiple other use cases that require even more specific sets of trust assumptions. Because at the end of the day, bridging is really just about who you trust, right? Who signs the transaction? Who locks up your funds and who custodies it, right? Is it your validators? Is it a multi-sig? Who's on the multi-sig, right? Is it companies you trust? Is it like Suzu? Like you really have to be careful about these things. I think especially for like asset issuance, which we heard about this RWA panel, something that's very exciting to me. Having security assumptions where you can have very trusted parties actually act as the signers feels like a huge unlock for the interop space.
Yeah. So you actually need to spend more time with Lyman. Where is Lyman? I lost Lyman. Because he's working on inter-ledger communication protocol, and you're going to love because it's exactly what you said, right? It's like layer ones talking to layer ones using the same protocol. But that's actually my next question. If you say that, do we need bridges? Do we need the Accelera and layer 0 of the world still? Because now ledgers are talking to each other. So question for you both over there. What do you think? Are you going to be around in 5 years?
Of course we'll be around. I mean, James will probably agree with me, first of all, right? Neither Accelera nor layer 0 are bridges, right? Yeah. They are both general message passing protocols, which is a big difference, right? And bridges tend to be built on top of these general message passing protocols using the cross-chain communication. So that's number one. But I think, will we exist? I think absolutely, right? I mean, if you look at the world as it stands today, like the future or the present is multi-chain, right? I mean, like we have layer 1s, layer 2s, layer 3s, supernets, orbit chains, super chains, like the amount of different chains and nomenclature that exists, it just continues to grow, right? And we have L2s launching every single day, L1s still launching, even though that seemed like, there's no way that there's going to be new L1s that are launching, but they're still launching. And so like, and no one, unfortunately, can agree on standardization, right? Like everyone's trying to solve kind of the same problem, but in different ways. And so I think as the world continues to expand, like I think it starts to make a lot more sense for each application with a decent user base to launch their own chain, right? You're seeing that Uniswap do that with Unichain and a bunch of other examples, Athena chain, et cetera. Like all these things are just happening. And so with the proliferation of more and more chains for specific use cases for app chains, et cetera, like I think what me and James do and what Accelera and Layer 0 does is absolutely essential to make this entire industry work.
Yeah. We're big fans of IBC. Accelera is built on the Cosmos SDK. And our belief has just been, as we've been discussing, there's a huge vertical stack of what interoperability is, and as Simon just said, a huge horizontal stack in terms of these different ecosystems. So maybe we'll see more specialization over time, but our bet is that one team and one protocol is not going to be able to solve this level of specialization for everybody. We see various consensus mechanisms that you're going to need to connect to. Not everything necessarily will be able to be solved with third-party validator sets. There's a lot of conversations, as I know the Hedera team is having, with private permission chains that institutions feel comfortable with. And all of these introduce a ton of complexity to how we achieve interoperability universally. And so I think that right now you see all the major players trying to solve for everything. And maybe over the next 5 years you start to see specialization vertically or horizontally, but doubtful that a single player is going to be able to consolidate the whole space.
Yeah. Someone told me the other day when I asked that question, and they said it's like saying, the FX desk in the world are going to disappear tomorrow. They're not going to disappear tomorrow. We all know that, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit similar. If you can share with us a little bit of what you're doing today with Hedera, with HBAR, for the benefit of the crowd. And we are streaming, by the way, so for the benefit of the world, really. Magnus, you want to start?
Yeah, happy to. So we're chatting with Hedera about an IBC integration. I believe Hedera already uses some parts of the IBC stack. But as a fellow L1 ecosystem, what we want to enable is native interoperability between Hedera and the rest of the L1 ecosystem. And in Cosmos, we have roughly 120 plus chains that are IBC enabled that account for over $2 billion in monthly volume over IBC. I think this is going to basically enable, first of all, a massive amount of asset transfer between our ecosystem, Cosmos and Hedera, which I think is generally good. We're in the process of building bridges, no pun intended. Yeah, that's something that I think we're really excited to start researching on. I mean, Hedera has a very interesting consensus mechanism, similar to Tendermint. It has fast finality, which is one of the best features I think ever created in blockchain. It means that the blockchain finalizes in one block. You don't have to wait 15 minutes. It's just 3 seconds. And I think this makes interop just tremendously easier.
Yeah. David?
Yeah, to be fully transparent here, at the moment we are not working actively on a lot of things. but that's the reason why I'm here. I want to change this. Yes. I want to work. I want to contribute. I'm interested in working with different blockchain ecosystems and see how we can interop together. I already mentioned we have something similar to IPC, so maybe we can contribute there. Our standard is also open. Happy to merge these and get the best out of everything, basically. So yeah, I think as I said, we all benefit by working together and ultimately unlock this next version of Web3, no pun intended. So yeah, that's basically what we are here for.
Yeah, yeah.
What we want.
And it's very inspiring to me to see in this industry all the people coming together to fix issues together, even though sometimes it's actually not beneficial for their own blockchain or their own companies, right? There is something very unique about this industry, and I've been in it for 12 years that I didn't find anywhere else, and I couldn't find anywhere. So thank you for engaging on this. Yeah.
And I think in a lot of things, ultimately, because you asked the question, will we still be relevant in the future, basically, and when there are potentially AI agents that automatically select the fastest, cheapest chain and so on, and are protocols then still relevant? But a lot is also about the network effect of the technology, making it usable, creating specific use cases for certain areas and so on. So
James,
we're connected on testnet right now for Hedera, and in short order we should be on mainnet. But I think Eric brings up an interesting point. Like Layer 0 is live there, and in many ways we're very competitive, right? Trying to go after major asset issuers, extend them to Hedera, and vice versa, bring some of those major asset issuers out of the Hedera ecosystem. But to the point Eric made, it is very interesting. There is this balance. We work pretty closely with Layer 0 and some of our competitors, realizing that growing the pie is more valuable than competing over what exists today. So it's this natural balance between them, and kind of leave it with some positivity. Like yesterday, the Ethereum Foundation brought together a large group of core contributors in the EVM ecosystem, working on some common interfaces for us to be able to extend these things in a way where you don't necessarily have vendor lock-in. So I think there's a lot of positivity that's going to come out of like this current push that we're making that's going to benefit the Hedera ecosystem in having better tooling, better connectivity with the rest of these chains that we're talking about.
Yeah. Simon?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and it's nice to see, I think, the industry come together a bit more. I think, ultimately it's about value accrual to the entire industry rather than to your own protocol, right? And I think like that's more of the mindset that I think everyone should have in this industry, right? Obviously, there's a lot of grifters and a lot of extractors in this industry, right? Sort of short-term focused, short-term greedy. I think we look at the industry as very long-term greedy, and I think the only way to get there is to accrue value sort of for the entire industry rather than for the protocol itself. So, so that's exciting to see. I think Hedera specifically, to James's point, we did launch our integration with the Hedera EVM network. That's been going really well over the past couple of months, and we're excited to, I think Hedera has historically been a bit of a closed loop ecosystem, right, of sort of like everything being native to Hedera. I think the EVM launch was a really good step in the direction of connecting it to the rest of the world. And so, we're excited over the next coming months to bring some of the assets that use Layer 0 today to the Hedera ecosystem, be that USDT 0 and Tether, be that Athena assets, and a lot of additional applications to the network, which will kind of, again, accrue value to the entire industry.
Awesome. I have two quick questions. One serious, one not serious at all. The first one is, project yourself in 5 years from today. Are we going to still be talking about interoperability, or are we going to just assume that it's there and we're going to keep moving and build stuff? How do you think of yourself as companies and even as individuals in this industry in 5 years? I guess is my question. Maybe I'll start with you, James.
Yeah, I've been with Axelar for 3 years. Those were 3 of the fastest years of my career. I don't think we're solving this in 5 years, but I think we'll have made huge advancements. And we might be dealing with much more precise issues in 5 years. But I think it probably takes a little bit longer than that to remove the discussion entirely.
Okay.
I think from everything I read and hear about the analogies to kind of Web 2.0, it took more than a decade to solve these issues, and we're probably around there now. So I think that's kind of part one to it, but I think that we're going to have made enormous strides. And so we might lose some players, not everyone, but might lose some, but I don't know if we're going to quite have solved it.
Yeah, yeah. Simon, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we still talk about traditional finance interoperability tens and tens and tens of years later. We still talk about SWIFT connecting banks and standardizing messaging there. So I think that word will not go away. To James's point, I think we make great strides. I do subscribe to the chain abstraction thesis. I think that will happen, and ultimately, hopefully the world that we live in 5 years from now is that the user just gets the value from their respective ecosystem without having to really choose that ecosystem, right? And who powers that interop, whether it's Layer 0 or Axelar or IBC connecting the rest of the world, whatever that is, hopefully it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's ultimately just the benefits that the end user or the end application or the end business will get.
Awesome.
Yeah, I want to pick up on the chain abstraction. I think in 5 years from now, ideally I talk to developers and so on about the details, about how it works and so on from companies, but the end user no longer knows what actually happens in detail in the background. And I think that's what we should work on, and that should be the goal, because no one is able to understand everything and look into the details, and as long as this is necessary, we won't achieve main adoption.
I think before you answer, I think it brings an interesting topic, which is if we assume that the users are going to not know anything about blockchain, not know anything about interop, how do we continue to be differentiated between the different layer ones and the different solutions, right? Are we going to be completely commoditized and no one is going to care about who we are, right? I think that's an interesting...
To quickly answer, because of time, so I think users no longer care, but enterprises, developers, and so on, they will care about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Magnus, you have 10 seconds.
10 seconds. All right, final pitch, guys. So, I mean, I agree with a lot of the points said about users not caring. I mean, I can't remember the last time. So, the financial system was left with, I would argue, a very bad interop protocol for most bank-to-bank transfers called ACH, right? Which was developed back when they were sort of clearing checks, between different banks, and even now it is slow. I think part of how we get over this hurdle, right, and we can actually build a better interop standard, which is being decided right now for the rest of the blockchain industry for years to come, and not being saddled with either vendor lock-in or something slow or something that is unsafe, is how well we create standards, right? Like, I think standards in banking has been massively beneficial to the user at the end of the day. If you imagine there was like, you know, whenever you wanted to transfer money from Chase to Morgan Stanley, you had like 20 different options, right? And like all of them required like some kind of different timing or trust assumptions or something like that. Like it would be extremely challenging and overbearing for the user. And so I'm a very big standard maxi, right? So in the different parts of the industry where people are coming together and deciding on, okay, let's actually share this because this is ultimately better for the user, I'm in huge support of those efforts. And I, you know, speaking for the IBC team, we are very open to creating those standards.
Thank you. That was a really long 10 seconds. I guess you don't want me to ask the funny question. That's why you did that, right?
Please go ahead.
No, so yes or no question. Is Jack Dorsey Satoshi Nakamoto? Yes or no?
No.
No. No. Okay, well, consensus. Okay, thank you very much.